You've landed at Spark Launch, the guide star for embracing what it means to be neurodiverse. I'm Mike Cornell, joined by CEO of Spark Launch, Chaya and Mike. Here, we navigate mental health triumphs and tribulations from all across the spectrum, charting a course to the shared experiences that unite us, and discovering how to embody the unique strengths within neurodivergent and neurotypical alike, igniting your spark and launching it into a better tomorrow. Hello there, I'm Mike.
I'm Chaya, and today we have a very special guest, Craig Maier. And Craig is a coach at Spark Launch, and he believes in the philosophy of Spark Launch that we all have unique strengths and gifts within us. And once we tap into those gifts and strengths and start living in those gifts and strengths and also learn skills that we don't have to support those gifts and skills, we will be not just living, we will be thriving. And also, Craig has a very interesting background. He is a former university professor and also a fellow neurodivergent individual himself. And he also is parent of a neurodivergent child. Welcome, Craig.
Welcome. It's great to be here. Thank you.
So, Craig, tell us about your background. We can dive into whatever part you want to share. I'm very curious about your childhood as a neurodivergent child, not knowing what the terminology or the characteristics of how was your experience?
Yeah, thank you. That's a big question. I think maybe what we could do is I'll tell you about a little bit where I'm from. I am from a small town up in the middle of nowhere, up above north of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. So I'm from Western Pennsylvania, United States. And yeah, I grew up there. I moved to Pittsburgh, and now I'm living in Germany. And I think we might be talking a little bit about that later on. But it's really interesting thinking about what it means to be neurodivergent, because that's not something that people talked about when I was young, right? And that's something that they're only really talking about now. And I grew up in the 70s and 80s, and I always knew that something was a little bit different about me. I didn't know what that was, that feeling of just being, an alien. I think that's feeling like an alien, basically where I was. And maybe I could also talk a little bit about my specific type of neurodivergence. So although I'm doing a lot of work in the ADHD area right now, I'm more on the side of being of gifted with autistic traits. So what that meant for me growing up, well, I was just a little bit different than everyone else in my community. I think that growing up and being where I was, first of all, I did very, very well in school. I was because there's things about the school that really interested me. I was very interested in math. I was very interested in history. I had very deep and abiding passions, but I was very different. I talk about, asynchronous development. I was a lot farther ahead than my peers. And that really took a toll on me in terms of bullying, not only from the kids in my class, but also even from adults. It was a very challenging space because of the area that I was in. People really didn't know exactly what to do with me, and I didn't know what to do with myself. And I internalized quite a bit of that.
So you said alien.
Yeah.
Right? So how did you feel you were different from the rest of the crowd?
Wow. I think that it's really hard to articulate that, because this was something that I just basically knew. I knew instinctively that I was maybe too much for a lot of the people around me in terms of my interests, my intensity level. I knew that. at the same time, I think that I was very used to very early on keeping my own company. So I was very good at playing by myself, right? Creating my own sorts of narratives, very complex games that I would play with myself. And so because I knew maybe instinctively that there wasn't a lot around me, that the just being able to talk with my peers was also very challenging. Yeah.
It somehow felt you were not understood, right? And
yeah.
One of the reasons that I think we learned to be really good at keeping our own company, internal company. I did that a lot as well. My entire middle school, I spent time by myself. I didn't have a single friend, and I played with younger children, and that was comfortable. Now, if I think back, maybe because they were not judgy, they were innocent, they're pure. Whereas the girls, it was an all-girls school. They were in groups, and it was a new school. So I totally get what you said. And did it bother you being alone?
I think on one level, I think it did. I think that I did feel quite lonely, but I also feel that sometimes the being with other people, and this might get into some of the autistic traits, right? Being with other people is also very stressful. It wasn't that I was frightened of being with other people. It was just, there was just so much to process and to be with other people that I was kind of comfortable being by myself. I mean, and I think perhaps because of the environment I was in, that, nobody really noticed that. That was normal to everyone around me, that I would be, even going into high school, not having met many people who I would find friends, I would consider friends. I mean, I had people I hung out with, people I might have, because I was very involved in music and so forth. So I had that sort of social relationships. But in terms of really connecting with other people and feeling safe with other people, I really didn't have that, and but for me, that felt normal and I felt okay. But it also, I think, that opens up a lot of challenges later on, because if you're used to taking your own counsel, if you're used to keeping your own company, you deprive yourself of not only just social connection, but also in terms of information about what you can do as a human being, as a grown-up human being. The information and those types of social connections that could help launch you into successful adulthood. I didn't have that. Those were resources that I didn't have, that I probably should have. I looking back, I really needed to have been in a position to develop those. And I wasn't able to do that until much later.
So to the external world, you looked like a lonely child, but internally, there was a whole different world, the universe.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I think that's true. And actually, I might not have looked like a lonely child to the people around me, because I did very well in school. I did very well in band. I had a lot of, social connections. I think that, but at the same time, I think that even in my later years in high school, I do think that maybe that sense of loneliness really began to come home to me, right? I remember feeling, maybe 15, 16, 17 years old, very kind of, I wasn't depressed, but I was definitely blue, right? There was something that I knew wasn't quite right, and a loneliness that was there. And so I think that because of just, I think because of the fact that I was doing well in school, that I seemed to have a lot of connections with other people, that flew under the radar and no one really asked me about it. And which is, I think one of the things that drives me to coaching, or one of the reasons why I'm really interested in coaching, is that I really feel that if someone had taken the time to talk with me at, 15, 16, and really talk with me, I think that would have really changed my life.
Yeah. You needed someone to listen to you.
Yeah.
To the real you.
Yeah. And yeah, because in terms of trying to figure out, because again, one of the things that was a challenge going through high school was that, I mean, my interests, looking back at my interests now, I think these interests were completely normal. But given where I was in the community that I grew up with, in, again, it was like coming from another planet. So like I was really passionate about history, for instance. But in my community, to say that I was interested in history and to say that I was interested in music, that was, oh my gosh, that's, oh, you're throwing your life away, child, right? You've got to grow up and major in accounting and do the responsible thing, right? And as opposed to having someone say, well, that's really interesting. Let's work with that, right? What might you be able to do with that?
Just honoring your interest. Because I think for the adults, and this happens a lot in our community as well, and the fear sets in of the adult of some image of their child that in the future they would be lonely, they would be poor, they would be in a place where they can't find jobs and things like that, which is a normal human behavior. I, as a parent, also did that. And then as a result of that, somehow your interests are not honored, the child's interests.
Exactly. And just getting back to what you were saying at the very beginning, there's so much power within those interests, right? How do we begin to work with them instead of saying no to that, right? And, majoring in history and music, oh my gosh, there's so many things you can do with that. I mean, knowing that now, right? There's so many things that you can do with that if you have the resources, if you have a plan, right? It's so important. And actually, the funny thing is that, well, actually, two things. When I was a freshman in high school, as part of the particular gifted program I was in, we had to write an extra paper. And I was really frustrated with that because I was like, oh my gosh, I'm already overworked to begin with. Why are you asking me to write an extra paper? So I decided to write the longest paper in the history of the universe. So what I did is, my passion at that point was ancient history. So I decided to write a complete history of the ancient world from the Neolithic age to the fall of the Roman Empire. It ended up being 62 pages single spaced. And I gave it to them and I said, here, take that. And that they never assigned that they never made that assignment to anyone else ever again. So I think I proved my point. Yeah. So I ended that for other people. But what's fascinating is, because my interest was ancient history, and I started out as a physics major in college because that's what I think was expected of me. And I ended up transferring because I was thinking about going into music school, but that didn't work out. So I ended up getting a degree in classics, right? That was my education. So I'm ending up doing it. But the problem is that because of the way that I ended up doing that and going through that process, I managed to do what I wanted to do, but I also didn't have the mentoring and the context to the resources to do that well, right? And it's so again, majoring in classics it's a really cool thing to study, but you have to be able to have a plan for that. Okay, where does this go? How can you begin to connect that with other things, other types of experiences, and so forth? But again, too, I think that because of, again, many of my autistic traits, I was really secluded in myself. I wasn't reaching out to other people. I was really hyper focused on the coursework, and then by the time I graduated, that was challenging for me.
So what were the autistic traits that you felt were blocked?
The ones that really come up for me is, I think, the capacity for hyperfocus. I think that there is the really deep commitment to particular interests. I don't like to call them special interests. That's what they talk about in the literature, I like to call them just interests because it seems, if I say it's a special interest, it's like, it seems very condescending. These are my interests and they're incredibly deep and I need to be with them and commune with them, right? A need for structure, a feeling of a real need to, again, interpersonal interactions were, they were challenging enough for me and confusing enough that that also was a real difficulty for me, right? Making friends, connecting with other people, being with other people, and that in terms of building a social network, building a job network, all that was quite challenging. So I think there might be some others, in terms of touch sensitivity, those things come up, but those are the four really big ones that come up for me: the structure, the real seclusion, the difficulties with connecting, the interests. Those things were the ones that were really came up for me, and so again, that's really helpful if you want to become an academic, right? Which is really what that's what I wanted to settle on, because I can drill down. I mean, when you write an academic paper, the first job that you have to do is read everything that's been written on that particular topic. And then I would say, okay, that's fine. Where do I start? Right? Top left corner we go, right? 1,000 pages later, I'm done. That's easy for me, right? But moving outside of that, right? It's again, it can be quite challenging and quite scary, intimidating. Yeah.
I'm just curious. I know for me, a lot of like the social issues that I've dealt with, very similar. And for me, with those, I also hate the term special interest. With those interests, I am able to focus and kind of structure things around those specific topics, what I'm into, what I like to do, but I'm unable to structure properly creating a social structure or interacting with friends and things like that. And it's because I'm attempting to put the same level of rule making and construction around social interaction, and it becomes very overwhelming to me. And where arguably many neurotypicals don't feel the need to construct around social interaction, where I think, I don't know if it's the same for you, but running into that problem where it becomes this job essentially.
Yeah, I agree. There's that it is a job, right? And it can be really, really challenging to figure that out. Actually, the one thing that's interesting is I ended up getting my doctoral work actually ended up being in interpersonal communication, interpersonal organizational communication, in large part because I was advised that was hard for me. And so I was studying something that was, so by studying it, by making it into a special interest, I was able to learn quite a bit. And so now I can navigate those encounters a lot better, right? Maybe because, I've kind of read myself into it, but I agree. I find unstructured networking to be, oh my gosh, that is, I really have to, I can do it. And maybe if it is something where a networking event could actually work, because I know everyone there is to network. And so I can come up with the topics and I can kind of navigate that well. But yeah, if it veers off that, it can be challenging. And the same thing too is I do find an ease when I talk with other people who are neurodivergent, right? There's an ease and a rapport that is almost immediate to me, because I think we resonate fairly easily on similar frequencies,
Yes.
Yeah.
I agree. So I have a question. Both of you said job. It felt like a job, social networking. So my question is there a desire inside of you to be social, that you have to do it, that you want to do it, and then somewhere it it feels like a job, or are you being forced? Is there like a force?
For me, it's a kind of a combination of like a yearning and the expectation. So occasionally they cross, but sometimes there's just an expectation that I have to go do this thing, and I want to show that I can do this thing, but it's like I'm being pushed to the other side of the room by an invisible force, and I'm trying to like stay at the corner. And other times it's me sitting in the corner yearning to go over there, but I don't even know how to approach it. It's like trying to walk into a lion's den and hoping nobody notices you or something.
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot there. Again, that yearning is there, but there's also just that uncertainty, because I don't know. Sometimes I don't know how it's going to turn out, right?
Yeah.
And because there are enough moments where things can go south quickly enough, really in very unexpected ways, that I go, oh my, it's better for me not to, it's better for me not to engage, right? So that I feel that, right? One of the things that I find helpful is, what I have found helpful in the past is being in spaces where I could find or hope to find people who I believe would be more like me. So academia, for instance, one of the reasons why I think I was really interested in academia was that, I felt that there would be greater chance of people who were like me there, right? I think actually Tony Attwood said that in his book on Asperger's, he said that academia and STEM fields. People congregate. People with that type of neurodivergence often congregate in those spaces because that's it gets rewarded there, right? And maybe if there was some, the hope was perhaps that I would be able to find and connect with other people. But the challenge, of course, is that you might end up in that those beliefs, those expectations often or may not always come true, right? The academia may not be the place where you can feel safe, because there are lots of things about academia that are not safe. And if you get overwhelmed easily, if you're highly sensitive, right, it can be just as challenging as anywhere else.
Yeah. Thank you for explaining. And it's so unique and different for everyone.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it's the fear of like the post interaction rumination, right? If it doesn't click in the exact scripted way it is kind of in your mind or your expectation, that you're going to ruminate afterwards on it and it's going to bother you. And then it's the anxiety and the fear of that may be happening that then keeps you from even trying. I know that's what I run into like time and time again. I want to go over there. I want to interact. I want to network. If something goes a millimeter to the left, then this is what I'm going to be thinking about for the next 2 weeks, and it's going to bother me. And
yeah, and it's about learning how. For me, it's about learning how to put that aside.
Yes.
Right. And say, okay, yeah, and I think it's one of the problems too is that there's the challenge of overthinking, right? And you really overthink this stuff, and because in reality, the person you're talking to might not have noticed. They might not have noticed that at all. I mean, actually, the interesting thing was it's very similar to one of the things we would talk about in public speaking, where people feel the need to talk really, really fast. If people are anxious giving a presentation, one of the things that they do is to talk really fast and be really frightened of making pauses because, in the dead air that comes. But when you look at that from the audience side of it, the audience doesn't notice that you might have taken that little extra pause because it feels longer to you because you're in it, right? And actually, the other thing that I always tell folks who are anxious about public speaking is to remind themselves that your audience wants you to do well, right? And that's something that I think about too, that in my interpersonal communication as well. It's the, person I'm talking to actually wants to have a good conversation too. They want me to do well. They're not nitpicking me to death.
I think we have this need to be perfect, and that plays to it as well. And it's the overthinking, the perfectionism. But if you look at all of that, somewhere that was fed to us that you have to speak a certain way, you have to be a certain way, or we ourselves in our minds thought that is perfect. Maybe it looked good on somebody. And so we think that we want to be that we admire. And in that process, we don't honor ourselves. And that plays out. So for me, all my life, my journey is to go inwards, believe in myself, speak from my heart. But it's a constant talking. It's a constant speech to myself. Believe in yourself, love yourself. You're perfect the way you are.
Yeah. And because that perfectionism is really it's trying to keep yourself from making a mistake. It's trying to protect you in the worst way possible. It just is it's just eating you up. Right. And so that need to really break through that, as you're saying, it's just like, because it comes from very early experiences of knowing implicitly that you're not fitting in, you're not like everyone else, and so it must be your fault, right? That's the thing.
Yeah.
Actually, one of the things I was reading is, like when we are very young, our brain waves, like up to like between ages like 2 and 6, I think, our brain waves are the same waves as if we were hypnotized, right? So what's happening is that when we're like 3, 4, 5 years old, we're walking around the world just accepting the world as it comes to us, because that's the only world we got, right? And we're making fundamental decisions and fundamental assumptions about ourselves and our capabilities before we have the ability to think critically about the world around us. We just suck it all in. So if you are growing up and, as a 4-year-old, you're a little off. The world is not like, you are not like everyone else. And but that it's either I'm wrong or the world is wrong. And it's too scary to believe that the world is wrong. So guess what? It's me, right? I've got to shape up. I've got to fit in. I'm the problem, right? And that's where the perfectionism, at least that's where it can come from, right? Because it's me, it's up to me. I've got to figure out how I'm going to fit in, and that's just exhausting.
It is exhausting, and we think that's where our skill learning is, to be perfect like somebody else. Public speaking was one of the biggest challenges, but then now I hear that is the biggest fear in the world today.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it comes from, for me, if I look back, it was asking me to speak when I didn't want to speak, when I was not interested in the topic.
Mm-hmm.
I had to use my memory to speak. The rote memorization, I was traumatized by rote memorization back. Yeah, I could never remember and say things. And so all of that added to my fear. And I knew I could not speak in front of a mic, which today I'm speaking.
Yeah.
So it was crazy. And so it's all the rules. It's the rules of you should be like that. You should speak like this. You should be succinct. You should not go off tangent. And the rules like that, because we're like sponges, right? We're sensitive. The neurodivergent population are super sensitive. So I think what anybody says will go deep inside and will stick. And maybe someone told me that when I was a child, I'm sure I was told a lot of things as a child. And as you said, we were all sponges, taking in no filters. And then we believe that's us, all those negative comments, those rules.
It's funny, as you're talking, well, one of the things that I did I think the greatest decisions that I made as a teacher, as a professor, was to flip my classroom. And what that means is I deliberately had my students speak first, right? So what I always did was I created contexts where if I had to present anything, like just I would, oh my gosh, no, because I know, again, I go off on tangents. I say, whatever comes into my head, which may or may not be, I mean, it's all fine, but it's all, again, it can be difficult for people to connect and so forth. But if I flip it around and have people talk to me and then I respond to what they were saying, that made everything go so much better. And so I was talking as little. So my goal was to talk as little as possible. And then every single semester in my teaching evaluations, somebody would always say, "I wish you would talk less." So, so I'm like, okay, well, yeah. So, but yeah, it's like for me, I have the same thing. I don't know if I have the public speaking anxiety, but I do have this real concern that I'm going to go off topic, right? And so as a professor, I consciously avoided giving presentations in like any sort of form, no slide decks, nothing like that. I really find that I find that really uncomfortable, right? So giving a TED talk, that's not what I do, yeah.
Yeah. Going off topic.
Yeah.
I know. I don't know where we wanted to talk about a lot of things. We wanted to talk about the German educational system.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. So what do we want to, well, first of all, what do you want to know? There we go. I'm flipping it around on you. I mean, because there are lots of different things that we can talk about there.
Just curious, especially from neurodivergent mind, what are the, first of all, what's the big difference from the US system to the German system? And why is it more challenging out there for a neurodivergent child compared to here? What are the challenges?
Yeah, so I can talk because I can talk about my son, because my son is neurodivergent. Somewhere probably we definitely see him as having ADHD. Perhaps also we just don't know where he lands right now. But it's clear that he's neurodivergent. We knew that before we moved to Germany, but then the shifting to, or we suspected it before we moved to Germany, but the shift to this context where the support system of being in the States wasn't there for him anymore, where everyone was speaking another language, it was much more stressful for him. And so the traits really asserted themselves. And so things that I found helpful about the German system, one thing that I thought was really helpful about the German system is that school here, first of all, it starts at later ages. So where in his school, he did kindergarten in the United States, and we re-enrolled him in the equivalent of American kindergarten, which is first grade. So German first grade is the same thing as American kindergarten, right? And German kindergarten is the same as American preschool. So it's kind of, they have different terms for the same thing. But it's similar sort of, he was in the first year of school. His peers, 6.5 and 7, in the United States, you're starting at maybe 5.5, 6, right? So they're already a year older. They come in not knowing how to read. It's actually advised not to teach your child to read. And the goal of German first grade is to know your alphabet, read simple words, count to 20, and add and subtract, which were the things that my son was expected to do before he started kindergarten in the United States, right? So you're starting later. You're starting in a lot less competitive, a lot less pressure environment. And the school day is maybe 3 hours long, 3 to 4 hours long. So it is substantially shorter. And what we noticed right off the bat was the amount of stress that he was experiencing early on was a lot less. When he would go to American schools, full day kindergarten, it was 6.5 hours a day, and he would, it's like the Coke bottle, right? You shake the Coke bottle, and then you take it, you take off the cap, and it goes all over the place. That was him every day after school. Now it's different. When he comes home a lot more regulated. He still is bouncing around and doing all these things. He's a lot of energy that is pent up. That's not nearly as much there, right? So those are the things that I really like about the German system. What's challenging here is and again, I want to just preface everything that I say that I am not an expert on the German education system, right? I don't have a PhD in it. I've not published any articles. So it's, this is just N of one, right? This is my own experience and talking with other people, talking with the parents, seeing what's going on here. But the level of awareness of neurodiversity in general is really extremely low. The level of awareness of ADHD is extremely low. When we talked about, because as the school year has progressed, my son is, those ADHD traits have come out. We've talked with, this was several months ago, a month or two ago, we talked with this teacher, and she said, we said that we think we might have ADHD, we're getting evaluated and so forth. And she said, the next day she said, that's really interesting. I went home and I watched a video on YouTube about it. And that was really what she knows about neurodiversity. Like literally, and she's my age, right? She's been teaching for 30 years, and so the exposure to ADHD is really low here. The awareness of it, I think there are lots of it's also quite difficult to get diagnosed here, and the way they go about it is. It seems to be quite different. The number of clinicians available to diagnose you is really low. We're in the city of about 250,000 people. I think there might be 3 clinicians who do evaluations for neurodiversity. And the question is the level of competence and awareness of those people. The other thing that's important is that the clinical framework for diagnosing ADHD here is very different than it is in the United States. The United States uses the DSM-5. Here they use what's called the ICD-10. So the ADHD has a different name. I think it's called hyperkinetic disorder here. And the criteria are slightly different in a way that centers, I really feel it centers the diagnostic process not on the experience of the individual, but on the expertise of the clinician. So I was actually looking at it earlier today, and one of the things they say is, in the DSM-5, they say symptoms of ADHD have to occur in 2 or more settings, right? Whereas the criterion is the full syndrome has to manifest in more than 2 settings and be witnessed by the clinician. So if a tree falls into a forest, in the forest, and there is no clinician there to see it, it doesn't fall, right? And so that can lead into a lot of really challenging situations. I was in an ADHD support group, and there was a woman there, and she said that she wanted to have her son evaluated for ADHD and autism. And she managed to get a clinician to see her son, and he did the evaluation. And the response was, well, yes, it's definitely that he has ADHD, but he does not have autism. And the woman said, well, have you considered this, this, and this? And so she was giving all the evidence that she had collected. And he stopped her and he said, no, he does not have autism. End of story. Case closed. Right? Again, really a different experience. I know of another person who was older and he I think had to go to 3 clinicians because the first 2 told him that, well, because you graduated from high school and college, it's impossible that you would have ADHD.
Wow.
Yeah. So that's
You talked about awareness. That's not fully present here also in the US. And also what people think of ADHD or autism is very different than the actual reality of it. And so even the fact that people look at it as a disorder, as a disability, it is a disability when you're trying to be someone you're not, right? Trying to fit into a system which is not honoring the talents and gifts that neurodivergent people possess. And so it is a disability in that sense, but there's nothing wrong with the person So that awareness is not there here at that high level that, wait a second, this child has something to offer to this world. Let's try to figure out what is it that they have and why are they even throwing those tantrums, or why are they being fidgety, or why are they running around the class? Why are they talking in class? What's going on? Well, let's try to figure things out instead of just calling it a disorder or a disability. So that awareness is not here. They're here or anywhere. And that's why we're creating this show and want to talk about that. And I know we are pressed for time. I would want to get deeper into the German system someday, maybe another day.
Yeah.
And how it's actually what harm that it could cause the child, especially I remember we talked about at a previous time about at some point putting the child away to a different system based on certain criterias, things like that, and the impact that could have on a child when they grow up.
Yes, because again, that's the reason why those physicians did not believe that it was possible to have ADHD and graduate high school and college is because children who are neurodivergent in a way that might inhibit them academically are simply not referred to college preparatory coursework. And that happens at like age 9 or 10.
That's unbelievable.
Yeah.
Because I feel that's such a young age, and that again does not define their intelligence.
No.
It's based on the current educational system.
Yeah.
Eating and reproducing, doing repetitive works, because they could still be great at math, but the delivery mechanism. Exactly.
And the perfectionism, it's difficult, right? It's not, this curriculum is very narrow. What my son is doing is very narrow, and it's not designed for people who are neurodivergent, particularly people who have, who might have ADHD, dysgraphia, dyscalculia, those differences, right? It can be really hard for you. I mean, it's just the whole thing of homework where you have to make an F 30 times. And if you don't get it right, the teacher asks you to redo it, right? That level, I mean, it just, oh my gosh, I just can't imagine what that would be like.
Wow. That's going against the natural instinct of not being perfect.
Yeah.
So that's how I grew up. I went to a convent school, and that's exactly repeating being neat, perfect. Those F's should be perfect, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It's the pressure of getting it right the first time, always the worst.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And that pays off into our adulthood as well.
It does. But again, I think the thing that's so important is to be recognizing that as parents, to be able to to give kids the resources that they need, right? And so it's, yeah, how can we find a way? Because that's what we end up doing a lot, is thinking about what's the best system. How can we find a way to get get our kid the resources that he needs to succeed? How can we acknowledge his gifts? It's, yeah.
And it's okay if those Fs are not perfect.
Yeah.
What does that have to do, right?
I find that infuriating. Yeah.
Just out of curiosity, what are some very at-home things people can do to kind of support their child's learning and development whenever we're kind of dealing with an education system that is a runaway train, and if your kid doesn't manage to catch it, they're left behind?
Well, first of all, I'm still trying to figure that out because my kid's only 6. So it's, we're at the very beginning of this, and maybe Chaya would have some ideas as well. But I really feel that I think that the maybe the first step, the one thing I'm trying to do is really trying to acknowledge and notice my kid in all of this, right? And so what is really lighting him up? What really interests him? How can I, and also how can I, if that doesn't align with his academic performance right now, how can I just let go of that, right? As someone who is really good at school, and my wife is also really good at school, it's really challenging when you have a kid who is not wired in that way, but is a kid who loves being read to, just the most, really, really complex things. So reading is a challenge for him because of the language and because of maybe some other, attention and those types of things. That's a challenge there. But being read to, he can be read to for hours, complex things, and he can process things that are, like deep, that are, communicated to him orally, right? So he has a really good memory of facts and historical facts, and he has really deep interests in ancient history and those types of things, and I think for us it's about maybe the thing is noticing his gifts, noticing his struggles, accepting those things, and then really trying to figure out what interests him, right? What are the things that really, really interest you, and connecting with those things. That's what I'm trying to do.
Yeah. And it's okay that he doesn't learn in the traditional way, but figure out ways he's actually learning. We are often punished for the methodologies and not the end result, because what really matters is how he shows up in the world, right?
Yeah.
And how he gets the information in his system. It's not about the way he does it, but yeah, he's going to soak in if he's into it, if he's interested in it, and if it's presented in a way that he will consume it.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, and he loves art. I mean, art. Yeah, he just doesn't like art class, right? Because art class, you're telling him what to do. If you gave him a sheet of paper and paints, he would, he would create anything. He would just go, right? Yeah, but he loves art.
Yeah, that should. I personally didn't go to an art class because I always felt that the teacher would tell me what to do, and I never wanted to be told what to do.
Which is, that's my boy. Yes, right there.
So that is, and I think definitely creativity. You should be given guidance as to what material and just kind of a high level picture. But to create, you need a lot of freedom.
Yeah, I mean, he really, because I think music is really important for him. Skateboarding, yeah, those types of things really important to him. These are really, and so it's, for us, it's connecting to those interests, connecting him to those interests, and then using that energy to begin to help him with the things that he might be struggling with. Yeah.
And you start by really celebrating how he intakes instead of like I've always intaken information or learned in a very specific way, usually centered on very specific things, and constantly having to, no, you're not supposed to learn that way. You're supposed to learn this way. You're supposed to go over here and do it this way. And it would shame me into like, well, I'm not supposed to do it the way that I want to. I'm arriving at the same destination, was doing it a different way. But when you and then we overpraise the, oh, you're doing it the same way everybody else is. Yay, you're doing good. It's like, well, why aren't you praising the way I want to do it if it's the same things happening? If you really celebrate the neurodivergence in that way, then it just excites the child to want to continue to go down that path and experience these things in that way because they know this is something I can do.
Exactly. Yeah.
So when it comes to your coaching, I was just wanting to know, how do you approach goal setting?
Within the session or within just life?
A little bit of both, I guess.
Yeah. I mean, I think so what I do is I approach, well, first of all, if somebody comes in with a goal, I think that's really great, right? It's like great. But sometimes, depending on, how you're wired, it might be difficult to come up with a specific goal, right? So I find that the end of the conversation is much more important than the beginning of the conversation. So we just kind of like go and we start, check in, and we follow about, how what's been going on, and then often a goal emerges, or maybe a goallet, I don't know, like a little goal, and then we kind of begin to work with that and inquire about that. But then what I find is at the end of the session where I'm asking, okay, well, how has this conversation been helping you, right? That's where they can begin to pull things together, and then we can begin to I find that to be the most important part of the session for me personally. As for the sort of life goal thing, what I'm finding really important, particularly for folks who are neurodivergent, is really focusing in on interest. Right? What is really interesting you? What is fascinating you right now? And and that to me, that's the key. If we can find, it's the same thing with my kid, right? If we can find what interests you, what you're really passionate about, then we can start to direct effort toward that. Because once you have that, it's really, it makes things so much easier. For instance, even, something like if you have challenges focusing in meetings, for instance, one of the things that we talk about is, well, what might interest you in this meeting? And the answer is, well, nothing will interest me in this meeting. Well, then that's why this meeting is important but not interesting. So yes, we just accept it.
Let's accept it, right? Exactly.
Let's just accept that. But there might be something about, okay, well, let's step back and say, okay, well, what might interest you about this meeting? And sometimes that actually could be enough, right? What might interest me in this meeting, that might keep you focused. And yeah, it's really, I find that really helpful, right? I mean, because for me, communing with my interest is, and that could be a lot. I don't have one specific interest. I have lots. But if I'm in the presence of my interest, I find that deeply nourishing.
And sometimes the answer could be just communication, right? Communicating to someone that you really may or may not want to be in that meeting. So it could the results of that could not be forcing yourself to be in a place you don't want to be because it's out of no interest. Maybe there are other solutions. Maybe there are other ways of resolving this issue.
Yeah, because if it's an important meeting but not interesting, and I don't really have to be there, could you just record it on Zoom and send me the link, and then I can just watch it on fast forward? It's like, it's like that, right? But
Now you can,
yeah,
I know now you can send AI bots to meetings, and
exactly.
they take down the notes for you. You don't have to be there.
Yeah, I don't have to be there. Yeah, I mean, so that there are lots of things that could be helpful for me, and it's knowing what is, which of course is, I mean, wow, Zoom fatigue. Yeah, just send me the transcript. Yeah, that would be genius. Yeah.
It definitely sounds like people would find a lot of value in your coaching specifically in the way you go about things, because it is always about getting down to the roots of any quote unquote goal. And sometimes the goal is just finding your goal. I've been in sessions where it's, hey, before the next one, can you come back with a goal? You're not helping me find it, so I'm not coming back. I hate that. It's putting all the work on the person. And when you're dealing with a neurodivergent individual, they are definitely probably going to have no idea. They know they want one. They know they want a goal. They just don't know how to get there. They don't know what the first step is. They just haven't figured it out yet. You're supposed to be there to take the journey with them.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'm sorry. Wow. That sounds very shaming too.
Yeah, no, it is. Is a people I do not recommend. If you ever hear that in a therapy session or coaching session, that's not a good way to go. That's not someone who's there with you. That's someone who's just like, hey, can you do homework for me at that point? And at Spark Launch, that's definitely something I don't think anyone is ever going to run into, because it is specifically designed to avoid problematic histories that the professional sphere kind of has littered about. And if you're interested in booking Craig for a coaching session, you can go to sparklaunch.org and find out any information. Where can people find you at on maybe social media or anything like that?
I'm on LinkedIn. So which is how Chaya and I met. I'm on LinkedIn. I post frequently there, and you can also find my website. It is www.craigmaier.com.
Awesome. And I'll also make sure to put all those links into the show notes. So if anybody just wants to head over there, Chaya, where can everybody find you at?
At sparklaunch.org, and also on Instagram, The Spark Launch, and Facebook at The Spark Launch. Also by my name, Chaya Malavam. You can look me up, and you can get in touch with me on anything neurodivergent. I would love to talk about it.
Great. And as for me, you can find me on LinkedIn, on Instagram at Follows His Ghost. You can also, if you go to the bio of particularly the Instagram, you can find information for my neurodivergent social support group called Motley Minds that is being launched with Forum. So if you want to sign up or are interested in hearing more about that, you can just send me a message there. First month of meetings is completely free, by the way, so feel free to sign up whenever you want. As for this episode of the Spark Launch podcast, thank you for joining us. We really appreciate your support. See you next time.